Do you have ideas flying around your head at light speed, but with little to no organization? If they're ADD, ADHD, or mild to severe dyslexia, they're going to say yes.
Welcome back to Educator University. As teachers, we've probably heard of dyslexia, but do we really understand it? Today's guest is Russell Van Brocklin, also known as the Dyslexia Professor. He helps teachers recognize the signs of dyslexia and use simple, structured strategies that actually support dyslexic students. Welcome, Russell.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so excited to learn more about dyslexia so we can better support our students. I think the first question a lot of teachers will have is, as teachers, we see a lot of students struggle with reading. How do we know if it's dyslexia? What are some of the signs that would be showing us this is dyslexia?
I get that a lot, and it comes down to two questions, right? The first thing you're going to want to do is to notice what the dyslexic child's speciality is, their area of extreme interest and ability. What I did is I went and I interviewed a lot of top dyslexic professors at major research universities. What I found is K through college, compared to their eventual peers, they did horrible. But once they walked into graduate school, top of their class, day one. All right. So with that, we come to our first question. What is their speciality? So what I typically do, it's a Saturday morning. You can do whatever you want. What is it going to be? That's their speciality. If you're having a more academically oriented kid, when I teach it privately, this is by far my most popular book. All right. See how thick that is? 1,000 pages. All right. Have you ever been to Disney World or Disneyland?
Yes, I have.
Okay. When you entered Magic Kingdom or Disneyland, have you noticed Main Street USA?
It's been a while, but yes, I think I remember. Yes,
Do you remember the Disney Magic?
I think so.
Yeah. The Disney Magic is based on two universal themes. They call it the most magical place on earth. The first one is really easy to find. The second one, which is 90% of the value, I've never had a parent read it. One example, the 12-year-old daughter said, "Mom, it's right here." Mom said, "I have a master's degree. I've missed that multiple times." But my 12-year-old daughter, who I started teaching this when she was 10, found it. Her comprehension is better than her parents. So why am I spending so much time on the speciality? Because when you're working with, besides the most motivated kid in the world, if you're going to get a dyslexic student to do anything, you want to focus on their speciality. So, for example, did you ever watch the movie Fast and Furious?
Yes.
Okay, do you know the scene where Paul Walker is working with a tech genius, and they just brought in a car that looked like it came from a junkyard and they're redoing it? And he says, "How can you do all this advanced computer stuff? Why are you not at MIT?" And he said, "I got that ADD thing. I can do this really well. I can't do the other things." So the biggest problem teachers face in our school system is that dyslexics, our brains are completely different. Our school systems are designed to teach from the general to the specific, and our brains are operating so quickly that we have little to no organization. So that continues to really come down to starting point. How do we address this? We focus on the kid's speciality, their area of extreme interest and ability. How do we find that out? You ask them this question once you find it. In your speciality, do you have ideas flying around your head at light speed, but with little to no organization? If they're ADD, ADHD, or mild to severe dyslexia, they're going to say yes. And then that leads us to our next question. How do we start dealing with this? All right. What I found interesting is when I spoke to these senior dyslexic professors, a lot of them were STEM, science, technology, engineering, or math, but they would be taking like art history, philosophy. And I was like, "Oh, good for you." And they would say, "Well, we don't really like those courses." I'm like, "You don't have to take them. Why are you taking them?" And they would say, because the teachers teaches not from the general to the specific, but from the specific to the general. So to tie all this together, let's look at the science. And I want to warn everybody, when anybody says they got a new way of looking at dyslexia that is completely different than Orton Gillingham multi-sensory approach, you have to be very cautious. Where is the science coming from? My science is coming from this book, Overcoming Dyslexia by Dr. Shewitz from Yale. This came out in 2003. Brain scans for the first time. So I'm now going to show you dyslexia in one set of pictures. Do you see? I'm not going to use the word non-impaired because I find that to be insulting. Do you see how the back part of the gen ed brain has all this neural activity?
Yes. Yeah.
Now look at the back part of the dyslexic brain. Do you see how it's essentially near zero?
Yeah. I don't see anything in this diagram. Yeah.
Yeah, if you look at it from a different angle, there's a little bit amount.
Okay.
Now look at
Yeah.
the front part of the dyslexic brain. Do you see how it's about 2.5 times overactive?
Yes. It's bigger.
Okay. Yeah, about 2.5 times. That's what I focus on. So what I'm going to tell you is going to sound this. The theory is very simple. I kind of equate it to, imagine we have Arnold Schwarzenegger. Bring him back to 16. Assumed he never weightlifted. And then we have the proverbial 98-pound weakling. And we put them both on a weightlifting regiment. Just by pure genetics, Arnold's going to develop a lot faster and a lot further. Now, the same thing with dyslexics. We have 2.5 times the neural activity in the front part of the brain. So I want to use that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So why? So how are we going to use that? That's the only question I'm asked all the time. Well, the first program that I created was, what happened is I started off with a first grade reading and writing level after college. I went to audit law school classes and I solved my reading and writing problems in law school. And then I wanted to show it to everybody else. So when we were looking at the problem, I wanted to go to the end stage and I wanted to solve it for students who, like what I was like in high school. They were highly motivated, highly intelligent, college bound, dyslexic juniors and seniors with excellent family support, the ideal. Said, okay, let's take a look at that. What we found on the pretest, and this was the research that was funded by the New York State Senate. I decided to just solve the writing by bringing their writing skills to the entry graduate school level. Why that? Because when I talked to the dyslexic professors, they excelled in grad school. So they're okay, what's the measurement for that? That's called the GRE Analytical Writing Assessment. Are you familiar with that?
I believe so. Yes.
So we take these high school kids, juniors and seniors, with 7th, 8th grade writing skills, and we give them a writing test for going into grad school. The smartest ones scored in the 6th percentile because their analytical skills were so immense. So then it took less than 3 hours to train their teacher. Her name was Susan Ford. It was at the Averill Park Central School District. And she rewrote the curriculum to meet how she taught and the students she was working with. So one of the key things as we progress and you learn what I do and why I do it, teachers are going to say, I don't like that. I've been training teachers in New York City how to do this for the past 10 years. And ever since that original presentation, if I made sure that teachers could take what I teach, they can adapt it to their teaching style, to who they're teaching, and the students they're working with. So you can have similar students across the hall with two separate teachers being taught two completely different ways, and they get the same results. I had to make sure that was in there. So she taught the program for one class period a day for the school year, the post-test. 30th, 70th percentile of entering graduate students. That's how they did in the post-test. Most of them scored average or above average. They went to college, no accommodations, GPAs between 2 and 3.6. All right. No accommodations. Cost to New York State less than $900 a student. Okay. That was 20 years ago. Now, when I presented that in New York City, I thought I was done. I was wrong. Two competing teachers came to me and senior professors came to me. Senior professors came to me and said, 70th percentile in the GRE writing assessment, we don't care. We usually get the 95th percentile. We want the craft of research. Are you familiar with that book?
I don't think I am actually at that book. No.
It was written in 1995 for the University of Chicago students at the PhD level because they didn't know how to write advanced research papers. It's context, get everything on the same page, problem, make it a short, succinct problem statement, and then the key thing is solution. Come up with a solution where you at least have a modest uh, piece of originality where the reader picks up something substantive. Because they say you can't do that, don't write the paper. Okay.
Yeah.
So I want you to imagine, because now this is 20 years later, I want you to imagine an AP English high school class with 20 students going over Shakespeare. And the teacher's taught this for 20 years. What are the chances of the teacher picking up a paper from one of these kids, these AP English kids, and learning something substantive, something new?
Probably very little because I've been teaching for a while, right?
Right. All right. They will tell you they've had it happen a few times in their career, and they will tell you about the paper and about the student, even if it was handed in 18 years ago. They remember. You follow this process, and every paper they turn in, the teacher will learn something at least modestly original. Every paper, every time. That's the power of the craft of research. So I had to incorporate that. And then I also had to incorporate what the other teachers came to me and said, what about you said you got this for, the super motivated, super intelligent kids. Well, that's a very small number. What about the typical student? And I was like, wow, I took 8 years off before I came back. And what I did as a foundation, again, I'm going back here, that overactive front part of the brain deals with articulation followed by word analysis. So what I had to do is I said, okay, what I found that worked the best after finding hundreds of ways that did not work is I switched articulation followed by word analysis to word analysis followed by articulation. Okay. And to give you an example of how that works, I want you to imagine you have a child in elementary school, and I'm stealing this from a special ed teacher in New York City. She raised her hand and said, some of my students are writing what appear to be randomly placed misspelled words. I don't even know where to start. And I'm like, I'm stealing that from you. Can you imagine? Have you ever met a student who was writing like that?
But yes.
Okay. Now let's just go to the most expensive way of overcoming this. It's called the Orton-Gillingham approach. Orton passed away in 1948, Gillingham in the 50s. The best private dyslexic schools in the Northeast, this is what they exclusively use. And the idea is you see it, touch it, hear it, use multisensory structured literacy to get them to write a basic sentence. And it would take you 2 years and $11,000 at a non-for-profit to become certified in this approach. We need to do better. So how do we do that? Let's have you pick a student, and you can change his or her name to protect their identity, who has had trouble writing randomly placed misspelled words. So do you have a student in mind?
Yeah.
Okay. Make up their first name. What's the name?
Let's just say Johnny. That's a pretty generic name.
Okay. So let's call him John.
Okay.
What is John's speciality? What does he love to do? And he's really good at? What is it?
I feel like I don't know if this would count, but video games that really enjoys that.
Boy, I ban that for boys because it's just it's horrible. Anything else? Soccer, baseball.
Something else. Probably a sports. Probably soccer. Yeah.
Okay. So let's assume that John, his life is to play soccer. Does it every chance he gets. So what we do is we have the student type, not handwrite. This will drive some teachers crazy, but here's why. I took the most elite students in my original program, the ones that scored 70th percentile on the GRE writing assessment, which was graded by a SUNY distinguished professor in psychology. And I then gave them another prompt, and I said, handwrite it. Barely met the 30th percentile. A huge drop. For us, the connection in our brain, there's certain weak points. Trying to write the letter W or just hitting a key, writing it takes up so much mental space. So we type. You can't type on an iPhone. You can't type on an iPad. Has to be a real keyboard. Mostly it's a laptop, or you can do a desktop, real keyboard. So what we do is we have them type out. You can type this out first, and then they can copy it. Copying default writing strategy, Professor James Collins, strategies for struggling writers. You type out hero, +, what are we talking about? Hero, +, what are we talking about? Then we exchange hero for John. John, +, what are we talking about? John, +, soccer. See how we got there?
Yeah.
Okay, now we have to have John write a 3-word sentence. So now I'm going to ask you some very specific questions. And when I do this at major dyslexia conferences, 90% of the teachers get it wrong. So you have to answer my question exactly what I'm asking. Are you ready? Okay. Do you think I'm going to fool you?
It sounds like you're trying to a little bit.
I'm going to try, but you have to be very precise. It's very
Okay.
simple. And then let's see if let's see if you can get it.
Okay.
Here's my question. Does John like or dislike soccer? What's the answer?
I think he likes soccer.
Okay, replace the plus sign with that. And what's the
Okay.
3-word sentence?
John likes soccer.
But that's not what I asked. I asked, does John like or dislike soccer? As an educated person, you automatically added the S and put it into the sentence.
Interesting.
John doesn't know how to add the S.
Okay.
So for all the teachers out there, how do I get this kid to add the S? Multi-sensory. Takes long time. It's just so time consuming. At the private schools, it's 4 to 5 kids per teacher. And wonder why they get the miracles. If I gave you 4 kids per class, I would expect you to reach miracles as well. All right, instead of the 20, 30 you got. So how do we fix that? Well, remember, I asked John, do you like or dislike soccer? He would say like, because that's what I asked him. Replace the plus sign. John like soccer. So how do we get him to add the S? Here's the one caveat I had to put in. I have to assume the child speaks proper English. That's the one caveat I found to make this work. So then what I would do is I'd ask John to read what he wrote out loud. John like soccer. John, does that sound generally correct? He's going to say no. I would say fix it. John likes soccer. See how simple that was?
Yeah. I think that's going back to your original idea of generalist versus specialist and giving that distinction for the students to understand the difference as they work through it. Right? Is that what you're kind of
Exactly.
saying? Yeah.
So basically, that simple process. You practice that a number of times with what I do 10 likes and 10 dislikes. Okay. And we have them practice that a lot, during those times. Now, here's the other thing. Remember what I said in my original course? The kids had horrendous spelling and grammar. And then it became clean at the graduate school level. Again, it was evaluated by a SUNY distinguished professor in psychology. All right. And the teacher, Susan Ford, spent almost no time on spelling and grammar. Does that sound kind of weird to you?
Yeah, that does seem the opposite of what you would think. So how did she get those students to spell correctly then?
Right. Yeah. I mean, no spell check,
Yeah.
nothing like that. And it was, again, the evaluator was extraordinarily harsh. So how do we do that? I designed it to have it autocorrect. So all you teachers out there who have been struggling for years to get these kids to do correct spelling and grammar, and to have it autocorrect, this must seem like, Star Trek to you. Is that about right?
Well, I think actually, for me personally, I've been talking about AI a bit on my channel, and so I think this is kind of like the step to AI in a way. You're using AI in a small way to correct things, so it kind of makes sense to
No,
me.
this
Yeah.
this was done 20 years ago. No AI.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So how we do that, and then I'll tell you about how we get into artificial intelligence. So how we do that is we tell the student to go ahead, and the rule is once they type things out, before they put a period down, they can ask any question. So they could ask, did I spell soccer correctly? If they didn't, you can say, here's how you spell it. They can copy it. Again, copying default writing strategies, Professor James Collins strategies for struggling writers. And then they just have to retype soccer. But once they drop the period, if there's a spelling mistake or a major, and I mean major grammatical mistake, they got to retype the entire sentence. So what do? They drop the period. And especially as we get into longer sentences, there's a spelling mistake or a major grammatical mistake, and I mean major grammatical mistake. So then we say, John, you made a silly error, or you made a silly mistake. One of those two. Those are the two least offensive terms that I can imagine. And you got to retype it. He says, I'm not going to make that mistake. He makes it again and again. Sometime between 3 and 12, you're going to see John get really annoyed with himself. And he's going to hyper focus. And by hyper focus, I'm talking like when you got two world champions playing the championship match at the World Chess Championship, they can lose like pounds just playing that game because they concentrate so much. Sometimes you'll see sweat coming down their forehead because they're concentrating so much. I'm not going to make that mistake. And they keep making that mistake until they don't. At which point they finally got that corrected. And then you move on to the next mistake that they make. All right. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's a lot of trial and error, and I think a lot of teachers have the spell check kind of things at their disposal, so this is a tool they could use easily in their own
Well, this is
practices.
something, what I want you to consider is what I'm trying to do is to take, like those private schools, it's 4-to-1. So what I'm suggesting is a new teaching model where you have the children working individually and you come around and check. And if you really want to have some help, get your AP English high school kids to come down and have them volunteer after school, and you can show them this process. And now the teacher can go and help guide them, and they get a really good, interesting thing to say in the personal statement for college.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So that is, and that's just the beginning way of how you apply this. Now, artificial intelligence has been
Mhm.
driving teachers insane. I have had teachers come to me and say, I can't use essays anymore because AI will just write it. But in a future episode, I'll show you how you can get around that. But just, generally for artificial intelligence, there's going to most likely be a presentation at the International Dyslexia Association's annual conference in the fall that deals with how to use AI ethically. How do I know? I'm a reviewer for the International Dyslexia Association's annual conference for reading and writing programs, and there was a brilliant one two teachers in the Midwest came up with. As a general view, what I want you to do is to go back and think about the craft of research, context, problem, solution. If you train your students how to go through each one of those levels, we do context in fourth and fifth grade, problem in middle school, and solution in high school. And by solution, it says if you can't come up with something at least modestly original, don't write the paper. So I want you to imagine you're an AP English teacher. You've been teaching Shakespeare for 20 years. You got super AP English gen ed students. Teacher will almost never learn something from a student. Maybe what, 2 or 3 times in a career sometimes?
Yeah, yeah.
You follow the process that I show you, every paper that is turned in, they will learn something at least modestly original. Every paper, 20 out of 20. Okay. So once you train a student in how to go through context problem solution, when it comes to artificial intelligence, it doesn't matter if they know how to prompt engineer at all. They just work with the artificial intelligence. To give you an example, 2 examples on this point. I had a student, she specifically wanted to go and work with a professor as an undergrad. Usually we do that for grad school, but she specifically went to this university to work with this professor as a freshman in college. I was a lot worse at this back then. And so she walks in and she says, after the first class, we got this big research paper. I really want to do a really good job. So I've been trained decently in the craft of research. Can we have a meeting so we can discuss how I can apply that? And the professor calls me. What is a college freshman doing with the craft of research? I can't get most of my PhD students to really do this. And I said, well, she started working on this in 7th grade. And she said, what? And I said, we're a lot better at it now. But I kept in communication with him. And what he said after several months is, I am learning little things, nothing groundbreaking, but I'm learning key little things that I didn't know before from this college freshman. Now he wanted to work with her because of her reading and writing skills, not wanting to work with her because of that. A lot of times professors want nothing to do with dyslexics because the writing is so horrible. They just don't have the time to go through it. That's one huge thing about the craft of research. Second one, out in the employment world. This happened last year. I had a kid who graduated. I found this just completely relevant for today's youth. Didn't like artificial intelligence, but the boss loved it. And he said, essentially, I overhired. Those of you that give me ideas I can use, will keep their jobs. Those that can't, bye. So he contacted me in a panic. I said, "You've been trained in the craft of research. Go work with the AI, come with the context." So he did. He comes back with a problem. "I hate this." I said, "Well, welcome to the adult world." Came up with a solution, wrote a 5-paragraph essay. Boss is going through the first one. "I don't like this. Can't use this. Can't use this." Come to his. "Good idea. We can do that." Guess who got to keep his job?
Yeah.
Within a week, he was training other people on how to use artificial intelligence. He says, "I have no idea I'm using it. I had to train myself, trial and error." And his solutions were so good, they wanted him to show that to other people. So that's how important that is.
And I think that'll be exciting for teachers to hear that because these are tools that students can use in the classroom and then as they leave us, which is one of the things, of course, we're trying to prepare them for, which is life.
Right. But remember what I said when it comes to ethical use. With the craft of research, here's the thing about artificial intelligence: you have to guide it. Now they have agents coming out, so you have to work with it and you have to guide it. If you know the craft of research, you can do that. You will be very well compensated. If you can't, you're on the other side. I see a lot of brilliant college students with real degrees from real schools, and they're doing high school jobs. Because the AI, a lot of the companies are saying, "Well, how far can we push this? How many people do we need?" Salesforce was going to hire thousands of new employees, and they found that their current employees with AI are 30% more productive. They don't need to hire anybody
Yeah.
that they thought they're going to need. So that's why it's important for them to understand it. But going back to the model, just so you understand what the essential model is. When I moved from the super motivated, super intelligent students to the typical student model, first thing you need to focus on is the student's speciality, their area of extreme interest and ability. I will literally, again, I will give this to a 10-year-old, this massive book to a 10-year-old, and we'll work on this for 3 years. If you can't go that far, because in our school system, we try to make students well-rounded before we specialize. That's the first hang up you're running into. When you're outside of the direct speciality, I found, for the most motivated kids, you're down 50%. When you're doing a typical student, you're down about 75, 80%. One area that this came from Evelyn Whitebay. She was on the dyslexia task force as a special ed teacher, one of the most successful in New York State. And what she said was, maybe you find 2 or 3 books where the student may not be ultra interested, but still interested. And if you can get the entire class within 2 to 3 books, you could apply this by going from group to group. Number 2, and this is something that teachers can control. Do not try to teach these kids from the general to the specific. Because remember that first question I asked, in your specialty, you have ideas flying around your head at light speed, but with little to no organization? We have nothing to latch onto. We don't ask what caused World War II, or more specifically, don't ask what what effect did Martin Luther King's famous "I Have a Dream" speech have on the 1960s civil rights movement. We have no idea, nothing to latch onto. But if you flip that around and ask what personally compelled Martin Luther King to want to give his famous "I Have a Dream" speech, with that, and then we have an anchor point, and we can then force our brain to go in linear step-by-step ideas from there. That's something we can do. And then the last part is word analysis followed by articulation, like I demonstrated when we have doing a 3-word sentence. So that's the model. But to further understand if a dyslectic if it's ADD, ADHD, or mild dyslexia, again, ask the question in your speciality. Do you have ideas flying around your head at light speed, but with little to no organization? Yes. It's one of those 3. Define severe dyslexia. Fingers, keyboard, fingers, keyboard. The idea is in your head. You want to type on it. But when you take your fingers and you put them on the keyboard, does the idea fly out of your head, leaving you with an empty brain? If they're severely dyslexic, they will say yes to that. They'll ask, how did you know? What caused you to, and I would say, you think you're the only one. So then when you ask both those questions, they answer a yes to at least one of them. Then you ask, is this how you would like to overcome your reading and writing concerns? Get a yes. You get the buy-in. And then I would find a book that they're extremely interested in. So for example, my most successful case, I never saw it before. I will never see it this fast again. Her name was Casey, end of 5th grade, 10 years old, reading at the 2nd grade level. And I assigned her this, all 900 pages won the Pulitzer. 10th grade to first year college level. 6 months later, she knew every word in that book. The dictionary definition of every word in that book. She worked alone for 2 to 3 hours a night, 6, 7 nights a week, and most of the days over the summer. And at the end, it was in October. She was now 11 as be entering sixth grader. She's in silent reading. The kids come over in silent reading class, pick up her book and ask, "What's this?" None of them could get past the first paragraph. Casey could read the entire book. And her mom called and she said, the school called. They said, "I thought my daughter had a severe reading problem. She's the best reader in her class. What's going on?" I said, "What do you think she was doing in her room all those nights?" I worked with her for 15 minutes a week, an hour a month. And in 6 months, she was able to do that. Typically, that takes at least a year, normally 18 months to 2 years. She did it in 6 months. So if a 10-year-old can do this, teachers can do this.
Yes. So it's kind of giving teachers the tools they need to really focus on and being effective with those tools. Like you've mentioned, some of these strategies in the past have taken a lot of resources and a lot of time. And what you're saying is these strategies you're offering are more efficient and effective.
Yeah. So again, what I keep coming back to, here's the book. It's the one in the field. And there it is. The front part of the brain, I use word analysis followed by articulation. What I'm saying is Dr. Sally Shaywitz was wrong. Instead of articulation followed by word analysis followed by articulation, so much more powerful. But you have to start off in the kid's speciality and then teach from the specific to the general, followed by that, and then you're golden.
Yeah. I think sometimes teachers are kind of doing a little bit of that already, but they can kind of also hone in those skills. For example, we have project-based learning, which is where students choose a project and they want to focus on that for an extended period of time and they get a student choice in that. Have you seen things like that working in the classrooms that you've worked in?
Yes. I basically train teachers.
Okay.
And the ones that have reported, like, for example, one teacher came to me and she said, this was from New Jersey. She said, "I have this seventh grader who's reading and writing at, the third grade level. And what she did is she gets him like 3 hours a week. She's a reading specialist." She said, "We use YouTube videos that he's interested in. I have never thought of YouTube videos." And I said, "Oh, how long until he's at grade level?" And she said, 18 months. I said, "Okay, you're going to get him from third grade to eighth grade in 18 months. She said, "Yeah." We followed along for about a year. And she said, "Yeah, I'm right on trial. He loves doing it. So excited." She sends him home with a bunch of homework. And his mom called up and complained. And he's like, "Hey, Mom, don't complain. I like this." He's like, "He likes doing schoolwork? What did you do to my son?" Okay. So, she was happy with that, and from what I understand, they met the schedule. So, yeah, it's as long as you can try. As a teachers try very different things. I just laid out to you the basic science on how to actually start working with a dyslexic brain the way our brain actually functions, which is the exact opposite of how things are taught. Our brains are completely different. Yet you're trying to teach us the way that you teach gen ed kids. And when we can't do it, we're called learning disabled. Slightly frustrating.
Oh, I'm sure, because really you have, I think, with dyslexia, you actually have a wider range of ability to specialize, like you said, and really like grasp onto those things that matter to you. All right, well, we'll do some quick questions. So the first question
Okay.
is favorite teacher lunch.
What do you mean my favorite teacher lunch?
Some teachers like bring a lunch with them every day. They have maybe a similar packed lunch they bring with them to their job or like something they look forward to on Friday or something like that.
Mine is I just get something from Subway.
Awesome. Um, Coffee or tea?
Mainly lemonized water.
Ooh, that's even better. A teacher that made a difference in your life.
That was Professor James Holmes. He's an economics professor at the University at the University of Buffalo. And he taught me, he's very dyslexic, and he taught me causality thinking, explain variables on top of what affects them, causal on the bottom. And for intermediate macroeconomics, we had to explain the Great Depression. And that was the linchpin of everything I've done. How to overcome reading, how to overcome writing, everything went back to that. And just to show you how, give you his story real quick, because I think you'll find this interesting. He was the worst student ever. He said, if I had to retake, he regards one of the top 1% of economists in the world. If he had to retake even a middle school or elementary school reading and writing test, he would flunk it. He entered a national science competition in the late 50s and got third place in the country. It wasn't for that, he couldn't go to college. Then he went to college. He started off with 7 majors, ended up with 3. They wouldn't let him get a degree in English. Was referred to the University of Chicago, which has always been the top economics program in the world. Interviewed by the second leading economist of the 20th century. With that, he got their top scholarship, the top economic program in the world. Came time to write his dissertation. He stopped counting the rewrites at one. How many Professor Holmes are we not having succeed because we still fail to address these reading and writing issues?
Yeah, whole story there. Yeah. Awesome. Well, yeah, I think it's always nice to have someone who's really made a difference in your life to share that with you. So awesome. Your best behavior management tip.
The best thing, these kids get so incredibly frustrated. The best thing that I can advise is when they're exploding, just understand you're working outside that model that I gave you. You're working in something they have no interest in doing. You're teaching them from the general to the specific, and they have no idea what to do, and they finally are at their wits' end. Best thing to do is try to, if you can, to have somebody else step in the class, pull them outside in the hall for a minute, just let them rant and rave and explode. And yes, use horrible language if it helps. Let them just get it out of their system. And then I would start going through that model as much as you are allowed to do by the administration. The biggest problem I see is teachers want to do certain things. They're professionals, they're highly educated, but the administration isn't letting them. That's the typically issue. Try to give them as much of that model as you can. Ask them especially that first question about the speciality and ideas flying around their head at light speed. And then you'll see, teachers tell me this all the time. Kid will go, how did you know? What's going on here? The kids are freaked out about it because you actually understand them. And once you have that, to say, just be honest with them. These are the constraints that I'm under. This is what can we do? Let them co-construct how they can move forward. It's a 5-minute conversation. And then you're going to go from the most frustrated kid in the room to one that's very compliant.
Last lesson that you taught.
The last lesson that I taught, this was a very interesting one. I was working with a teacher, and she had these brilliant special ed students. And she said, how can I get them to do the innovation, the solution? So I went through and I said, okay, what we're going to do is I'm going to show you a very specific set of techniques that allow your dyslexic students to actually come up with something very unique to say. And just so you know who she worked with, it was in a very wealthy public school district, and she had the privilege of working with, let's just call her version of AP dyslexic kids. All right. And so I showed her that process, and what she reported back to me. This is one of the kids she was working with on a volunteer basis over the summer who was financially challenged. And she said, wow, I got some ideas back that I never thought before of this book I've been teaching forever. It was on mice and men. And she said, he came up with a perspective that I never thought of before. It was on a minor scene between minor characters, but still, she was like, I never thought of it looking at that angle before. Something just modestly original. I said, okay, now when you apply this next year to your group of very motivated dyslexic high school kids, that's going to happen all the time. And she said, this is really weird. Because I can only imagine you're a teacher, and let's just again say it's AP English high school kids. They're writing the same paper that they did since the 1950s, or probably before that. Okay? And then imagine reading all the papers and learning something a little new from each one.
Yes, that'd be nice as a teacher to have that experience for sure.
Yes. And they just really love that. And why is it so important to do that? Because those skills translate into the workforce where, as a teacher, you show up day one. You got to be successful day one. You got a class of 20, 30 kids who have to get to a to the end point of what they're supposed to be able to do, and they all have trouble with it for some reason, and you got to figure that out and make it work. You're doing constant context problem solution all the time with every kid you're working with. Now, to imagine leaving high school with that ability and just practicing it in college makes it so much easier.
Yes. Yes, I think that a lot of teachers would like to have that for sure. So kind of going into that, where can the audience find you if they want to have more information about you?
Two ways. I sent you a link customized for your podcast. What I would suggest to do is go to the description, just click on that.
Okay.
Brings them to a page where we're offering a download, the 3 reasons your child's having trouble in school due to dyslexia, how to get past it. It's this, and it's general information that we discussed today, but it's for parents. But you fill out the form, and you can set up a 15-minute one-on-one discussion with me about any problems you're having, with your students directly. Or if you want something more direct, you can go to dyslexiaclasses.com. Again, that's dyslexiaclasses, plural.com. And there's a contact me form there. You can fill that out, and I get right back to people.
Thank you, Russell. I appreciate you sharing so much about dyslexia and helping us as teachers to know a little bit more and how we can support our students. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.